Welcome back to the Tall Boy Radio podcast. Thank you very much for anybody who joined in last week where we outed ourselves as geeks. Apart from Andy, got away with that one relatively unscathed. This week, it's another very different topic. But before we get onto that, let's say hello because we're joined by Ken, who's not been with us now for 10 episodes, dude. Say hello.
How you doing, guys? Welcome. It's nice to be back. Hiatus. I was at work. We've changed to a new shift pattern, and it's just made it very difficult for me to be available. And had some relatively annoying health issues as well. But March the 16th, hopefully that'll be fixed. So, Colin, thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
Top man. Gazza?
Hi, guys. Looking forward to this episode. No spoilers as to what the topic is. I'll let Beans sort of let you in. I am drinking, as always, a fantastic Tallboy Radio favourite of Hoygarden, and sporting in a TBR glass. And for those keen-eyed ones amongst you, I'm also wearing TBR t-shirt merch as well. So, happy days.
Top man. Very nice t-shirt indeed. Andy?
Howdy. I'm drinking a Hay Club whiskey out of a nice little Beavertown glass. That's lovely nice stuff. I normally mix it in beer, but I thought I'd treat myself just to drink it neat for once.
That's very nice.
That's the way it was intended, dude. That was the way it was intended.
Great.
That's it. Out of a Macclesfield Town cup as well. Very nice. Indeed, Siltman, indeed. And I am on the Erdinger Weissbier, so I'm on a German one. Again, quite similar, I suppose, in many ways to Gaz's Hogarden. Make your own puns there. And I'm drinking out of a TBR glass with our four faces on it. I thought it had to be done.
Nice.
And again, for the keen-eyed amongst us, I'm also wearing the grey version of the T-shirt. We didn't even discuss this one either.
We didn't even know.
Oh, that's it. You know, I do spy on him while he's getting changed, obviously, because he lives next door.
Oh.
But yeah, I also have the Tall Boy Radio on mine. It's sporting the pink double trouble badge, or whatever you want to call it, the embroidered badge on the shoulder, because if obviously we've had Dave on, haven't we, from Double Trouble quite a few times. Really, really good guys. And they are supporting ladies' darts this time, which is why Double Trouble Darts has gone pink at the moment. So if, you know, they are taste testing their pink gin. So if you order a bottle of spirits at the moment from doubletroubledrinks.co.uk, you get a miniature of the pink gin as well with it, which I had last night. And I have got to tell you, this is really, really good. I let Kim have a little bit of a sip of it, and she thinks it's better than their actual gin. It is a rhubarb flavoured gin. And you know, Edinburgh Gin do one, which is rhubarb and ginger. This is better because it's just the rhubarb. It doesn't have that taste of ginger in it. Honestly, it's really, really good.
What's wrong with ginger?
Well, that was a faux pas there, wasn't it? Yeah.
I'll go quiet again now.
Controversial start.
That is, yeah, that's it. Yeah, put me phone in very early doors. And the reason why they sent me that is because they have also got their darts available, which are available to be won in a competition. They've done them in two styles. One is here. I don't know if you can make that out there, with the red, white, and green, and it's very aggressive grip style, 24 grams. And actually, that is the one that I designed, or at least had a pretty big hand in design. I sent my picture off, and I said, if you're making them, I don't mind paying for one of them. Can you send me a set? And that's exactly what we did, which is why they sent the pink gin as well. So, yeah, really, really nice start to throw. But then again, I would have to say that because I helped to design it. Yeah, thank you very much. Anybody else got any shout-outs they'd like to do?
No, not well. I say no, not other than the normal sort of Twitter crew in terms of sort of shout outs, retweets. Obviously, I'd like to thank Tid and Shiner. You know, we've sort of said thank you previously and stuff, but give them, you know, props. They always give us shout outs. Just the normal crew, just the normal guys, you know, the regular listeners. I did have a couple of messages from Vron. So, Vron, if you listen again, thank you very much for your input. Can't wait to get you on talking on the podcast. And I know you said, you're still a bit unsure, but we'll keep going. We'll keep trying to work on you and make sure that you make an appearance at some point. So, yeah, thanks for your input. And if there's any listeners out there who you do want to sort of get in touch with us on all the normal sort of platforms and have your say. Tell us what you think. Tell us if you agree, disagree, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. Any of you other guys got any shout-outs before we begin?
I wouldn't have seen any of that because I'm suspended from Twitter at the moment.
Oh, are you?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, suspended without any sort of like solid reason. So it's one of those I got dragnetted because of some political things or people I follow. I got dragnetted by Twitter and suspended. So.
Oh right.
And in fairness, I know it sounds odd. I'm not missing it. It's amazing. Yeah. I did the same thing with Facebook a long time ago, where I just removed the hyperlink button from my browser, and if it's not there, you don't go looking for it.
Yeah.
Just literally just stopped. I'm still part of those political groups. I'm just on a completely different format now and a completely different place. But yeah, so yeah, suspended currently. I think it's been over a month now, maybe. So
interesting. Interesting. There you go.
I know. What a reprobate.
Well, I'll tell you one other thing that you've missed then that we've shared today, and that is that we are not only are we still in the charts in Poland at number 37, so we're on the rise.
I was going to say climbing,
and now we've made it into the top 200 in New Zealand, where we're number 68. And it's not that long ago that we first were listened to in New Zealand. So something's happened in that whole region that's made people start listening to us. So whatever it is, I'm quite happy for it. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, as regards to shout-outs, New Zealand's a great thing because we just had a guy who started our place called Dave, who's just started from New Zealand. So there you go. There's my shout-out.
There you go. Dave from New Zealand.
Dave from New Zealand. Very many of them around.
Yeah, we can rule him out because he'll be listening here.
He will be.
His family might be listening in New Zealand. So
that's it. Yeah, of course. Just to see if he gets a shout out.
I'll mention that next time I see him. I'll tell him.
That's it. So this week, like I say, it's a very, very different topic to the one we did last week. We're actually going to be talking about serial killers. We're not going to sensationalize it, so don't worry about that. There might be some details that the more easy-hearted of you might find a little offensive. I don't know, but certainly we're not intending to offend. We're not going to be doing serial killer top trumps. We're going to be looking at what it is about the human nature, the human psyche that is fascinated by people who carry out that ultimate act of betrayal, I guess, for their fellow human man. And we're going to try and maybe get to the bottom of that. We'll try and keep it lighthearted, as is the TBR way, but it's one of those subjects it's difficult to be lighthearted about. So what we've done is we've each picked a serial killer, or I think, Gaz, you've got a couple, haven't you?
I've got a couple, yeah. I couldn't choose. So there's a couple of notorious ones. So there's one main one that I'll talk about, but.
Cool. So what we're going to do is, we're going to chat about them and then just try and get to the bottom of what it is that makes people so interesting. Because let's face it, whenever you see those documentaries on Netflix, on Sky, or wherever you watch it, Amazon Prime, they always get you sucked in, don't they? They always get you sucked in. They always get you fascinated. So we thought we'd talk about that. So who wants to go first? Who wants to go first, highlighting their individual or individuals?
I'll go first then, because nobody else shouted up. So I did pick 2 or 3, and they were UK-based serial killers. But the one that I went for was a guy called Harold Shipman, who was basically he was a GP, he was a doctor, and whilst doing a bit of sort of reading about him and what he did, he's come up with being the most prolific serial killer in terms of people who they believe he has murdered. So he was actually convicted on 15 counts of murder, but following his conviction in 2000, I think there was an inquiry or a government report that was written in 2004, 2005, and they said that actually he was responsible for 250 murders, which puts him quite convincingly at the top of sort of serial killer lists in terms of the number of victims. you can slightly categorize it in terms of medical sort of people have medical knowledge and serial killers, because there's lots of nurses that have been attributed to sort of killing various children on children's wards and hospital wards and stuff. But in terms of how many victims they believe he has killed, it's 250, which absolutely blows my mind, really. Particularly because there was never really any suspicion that he was doing it. And that was the thing. It was, and I suppose for me, for those of you that don't know, I'm married to a doctor. So, you go to the doctor and it's somebody that you trust in, you believe in, you effectively wholeheartedly follow their guidance and their, so he generally he sort of killed his victims by sort of lethal injection, and then what he did was he then effectively wrote it on the death certificate as natural causes. That was his modus operandum as such. But when you dig a little bit deeper, the majority of his victims were actually relatively healthy when they started visiting him. So how 250, and I won't say all of them were relatively healthy, but how a number of relatively healthy victims could visit this one doctor and then within a period of time die in relatively suspicious circumstances, and nobody really attributes it to him. I find, and I won't say grossly negligent on the part of the police department that's investigated, but how I'm struggling to get past how that could happen without certain things being flagged or being raised, I suppose, for me. So yeah, he was the guy that struck a chord with me because I remember it. He was convicted in 2000, so it's somebody that I remember. And when they asked sort of why he did it, he didn't really say. So there was no motive as such that he gave, but they suspect that it could be one of three things. And even though he forged one of the victim's wills to try and get some money, they actually felt as though that financially that wasn't the reason why he did it. And they said it's one of three things. Either it was to avenge the death of his mother, who had died sort of earlier on in his life. Secondly, was it an act of euthanasia, in as much as he'd killed off predominantly elderly people who he felt then would be a drain upon the NHS and the healthcare service, which then would be a drain on refunds and resources that could be attributed better elsewhere. So that was it. And the third thing, which I find sort of fascinating, and I hope we discuss this in a little bit more detail, is actually the power of life or death that he had over people. And that bit fascinates me in terms of, was that the overriding sense of, I have the life of that person in my grasp, and I could easily give them something that would take that away. So that for me was something that hit a bit of a chord with me, and I was like, oh wow, okay, and started to get me thinking about that. So he was a guy really that I wanted to sort of talk about. And there's a couple of others, I might get to them a bit later in the podcast. But yeah, he was the main one. He was the guy that instantly sort of, and possibly to our American listeners in particular, might not necessarily have heard of him, or international sort of listeners might not necessarily have heard of him. I think they probably will have heard of a couple of other guys that you guys are going to talk about. But for him, I don't know whether he would be that well known. But when you search for it, he literally is at the top of the list of potential victims and stuff. So yeah, he was the one that I spoke about.
I think when you think of the phrase serial killer, and I know when we got onto Ken, yours was quite an interesting twist on that as well. But yeah, you think of some callous individual who perpetrates sort of very violent crimes. That's the first thing you think of. And then, like Gaz said, this is somebody who you voluntarily go and see. You place your trust in them. And he then obviously, literally has the sword of Damocles hanging over you and chooses whether to swing or not. And that is quite, was that his motivation, that power, that, I can't say it's a position I'd want to put myself in. It's nothing that appeals to me. You'll be pleased to hear, guys. But that is, that is the ultimate power, I suppose, over your fellow man, isn't it? What are your thoughts, guys?
Do you think some people actually knew he was like the Grim Reaper and thought, well, euthanasia is not illegal in this country, so why not go and visit this guy who possibly can do it? I mean,
oh, dude, but that opens up all sorts of moral questions in terms of
shout.
Did if you knew victims were being killed in a euthanasia way in the UK, that's against the law. So, and I get what you're saying, Andy, in terms of, but then what would distinguish him from these elderly people going to a different doctor and actually being treated in a different way? And I take your point, Andy, and I take your point in as much as, okay, if you were a relative or whatever, and you saw this elderly person in pain or suffering, would you go down the euthanasia route? And that's, I suppose, a whole different podcast. But the people that were his victims, the majority of them were actually relatively healthy when they first started seeing him. So it wasn't a case of they were ill and they went to this guy knowing that maybe he could do something for them. They went to him as a GP, relatively, sort of healthy as such. And obviously over a period of time, I don't know whether or not he injected them over a period of time, which then made them, I suppose, like slow poisoning as such, and therefore that he made them ill and then eventually he died. Or it's a case of, let's go and see him, I'm fine 1 minute, they get a lethal injection the next minute and they die. I don't know how many people had that sort of month on month deterioration, or whether it's just I'm just going to inject you with something, therefore you die type thing. I don't know, but that would open up a whole absolute kind of whoop-ass in terms of, if you knew this guy was doing it, if you knew he was doing it and therefore you wanted one of your relatives to go there, why did the police not do it and arrest him? Do you know what I mean? So sure. I absolutely take your point, Andy. There might have been, but it would have to have been known for that to have happened. I don't know.
Not to put a bad light on the police, but like some stuff over the past has been overlooked, shall we say? Some like top TV presenters. I'm not going to that, but in the past, all that sort of stuff got overlooked by various high organisation people and police and stuff. So I'm not going to say this is the same sort of thing as that, but it went over like a 30-year period or something like that as well. I can't remember this full story.
Yeah, was it from 71 to 2000 or from 71 to late something? He was convicted in 2000, and I'm sure that he was born in 46, so 46, 56, 70, so he would have 56, 60, so 25 years old, something like that when he qualified. So born in 46, first victim was 1970 something, was it? Maybe I don't know. So it was certainly over a period of time. I'm trying to. I don't think he killed. I don't know. I don't know whether he killed people when he was the age of his first victim. I'll just have a quick look there. You guys carry on.
I guess no one knew how long it was.
If
it pertained to be 200 people or 250.
That's it. Yeah, I guess anybody who sort of died under his care, there's a question mark over the authenticity. I mean, I guess that some of those are unavoidable, but some of those, I suppose, and I guess as well with him, like it's an unusual one. It is an unusual one. Whether is he one of those guys that you would, if you saw that documentary on Netflix, is that one you'd jump on board and watch?
I probably would if there was something about it. It said here, estimate 250 people beginning in the year 1971. So the first one allegedly, he was born in 46, so 25 years old was the first one. Basically, in most cases, injected them with a lethal dose of a painkiller called diamorphine, and then signed a death certificate attributing the incident to natural causes. So he was 26 or 25 when he killed his alleged first victim. You're like, wow, that's like a really quick abuse of power, if you know what I mean. Do you know what I mean? So
you had 29 years to do it, and even at 250, that's what 7 or 8 is, 8 or 9 a year.
Yeah,
that's one. That's one every 6
just
weeks.
One a month or whatever it is. Yeah. It's just like, wow. Yeah.
I mean, what?
Yeah.
And nobody
Like-
asked. Yeah.
Just what?
To break down stuff like, because you're going on about people being comfortable with him and stuff like that. The psychologist Joel Norris in '88 broke down the phases of a serial killer, which starts off with like an aura phase where they start to withdraw from society, and so it's like lessen their social interaction. I mean, he didn't he work in a small town or a village, didn't he, or something like that? So he didn't have that much interaction anyway. Yeah. But they then start. It can lead to, it can be months or years, but then the phase is to act upon whatever fantasies they were having. That's the phase. The next phase is the trolling phase, where they literally have to find a suitable victim. At that point, they will scout out locations they're comfortable with, approach potential victims. As a doctor, he would have had ample. It would have been like a smorgasbord for him. He could have picked anybody at any time.
Yeah.
They then sort of like begin a phase, initiate contact to begin the victim's trust and confidence in the wooing phase. So as a doctor, you don't look particularly well there. Do I not, doctor? And there's the cycle continues.
Yeah.
And then it's basically to gain the trust of their intended victim once they've discovered them. Once he's won the victim's confidence, he'll move on to the capture phase, which is an incapacitated victim. So, or in some cases with him, where he's the only doctor or the only person that person will see. So effectively, they are captured, and then they'll go into the murder phase, which is obviously the obvious point about the ultimate goal. They then apparently go into a different phase called the totem phase, where they one or more take items due to deflation and beginning depression, because they've done it and now there's nothing to fill that void, so they've nothing to build up to. And then they have a depression phase, and then once that passes and all their evil thoughts about, then they get back to a normal thing. They go right back to the beginning, which is the aura phase, which again, months, days, weeks, however long it takes, and then they just repeat the cycle. That's what a serial killer does. They repeat the cycle.
And I know they talk about the high or the buzz of the kill, and that's a horrible phrase, and obviously I don't mean it necessarily in the way that, but they then say, well, that's why a lot of the serial killers there, the period of time in between their kills gets shorter and shorter, because effectively they kill the first person, they get such a rush that then it takes them quite a long time to get over that, but then they want that rush again. And then the more I suppose in a way it's a bit like most addictions, in as much as it then takes hold of you, and then you want more and more and more and more, quicker and quicker and quicker, I suppose. And that's why, generally speaking, the time period between victims gets shorter, because they're after that buzz, they're after that kill.
Absolutely. So you go from one, and then you go one again, but shorter period of time. Then you go one even shorter. Then it's two.
Yeah.
Then it's two in a shorter period. Then it's three, and then they just bounce between. Was it Richard Ramirez was good at that. There's an excellent documentary on Discovery Plus about him.
Yeah, it's a good podcast as well. Mary from Purposely Curious did a really good podcast actually based on that documentary.
Is he the Night Stalker? Is he the LA Night Stalker? Yeah. Because there's a Netflix one, and Amy, my daughter, has watched it. She's fascinated by it and stuff. So just the psyche of it. But yeah, she spoke about
to quote Adam, he's an evil dude.
He is an evil dude.
But it's interesting because do they then change their MO in order to get a different type of high or a different, or do you stick to the same MO because you know it works? Or the whole psyche of it is fascinating, isn't it?
He didn't, interestingly enough. Actually, he largely stuck to what he was doing. I think it was his trainer. It was a trainer print. He had a very rare type of trainer. That's what they ultimately managed to track him down on. So yeah, he was a very, very unpleasant individual. But just to take you back then, Ken, to those stages that you were just talking about, one thing concerned me a little bit there, and that's that first stage, that withdrawing from society. If you look at that current situation that we're all in now, thank you to this pandemic, there's a number of people who are being forced to withdraw from society. Would that be forecasting, do you think, then potentially more and more instances of these things happen?
I think it's I mean, it's as Dr. Norris says, it begins to people can begin to metamorphosize into a portal of fantasy. They can vary and include acts of violence or sadistic thoughts, depending on individual conditions. The aura phase can have varying length of times. Everybody in this pandemic has been forced into effectively an aura phase, whether we liked it or not. There are, I mean, the untold story from this pandemic will be mental health.
Yeah.
The amount of relationships and divorces that will break down because people realize they can't actually stand each other and they can't have that much time together without reaching a point of no return. I agree. I actually agree with regards to what you just said. I think is a situation now where there are millions and millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world who may be now on a knife edge of waiting to get out, and then I've planned it. It's meticulous. I've planned it. Right, we can go out again, and just go nuts. We've all, as I say, we've all literally we've all been forced, but against our will, into a withdrawing from society. Human beings are social creatures. They need interaction. They need to have that feeling every day to release the right sort of chemicals in the brain. And once you start withdrawing from that, you start regressing into a more feral state. While your brain tells you you're doing something, you're doing the right thing. Yes, it's good for you. It's just not the right way for obviously people. I'm sure there are some exceptions. I'm sure there's some very good exceptions of people who didn't withdraw from society and just literally just went off the road. But I think you'll find 90% of them, of serial killers, were all going through the phases.
Yeah,
Including the aura phase, where they literally just slowly withdraw from society. Oh, we used to come out so often. Yeah, we used to see him all the time. Oh, he only comes out like a couple of times a month, once every 6 months, once a year. And then, but some people are predisposed to do that. I mean, it's just like, are killers born or are they made? Which is another interesting psychological question.
Yeah, that's the whole, that, and again, I was doing a bit of, when I was reading about the serial killers, and that was a question that popped up on the sort of search engines and stuff, and there is that, I suppose, nature nurture sort of debate.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. I was trying to find the right words for that. But you're right. Yeah. Nature nurture.
And I suppose, and I would say, going back to my old A-level psychology days, but I don't remember a lot about that. So, and that I did remember, I wasn't able to put it down on paper and get a decent grade. So. So, but yeah, you talked about whole nature nurture, and there was a quote, and I wish I'd got it now, but effectively it said, in a way, it's a bit of combination. There would be some things that would be genetically inside you that would manifest itself, but actually a lot of the sort of serial killers would have traumatic experiences maybe early on in life, and then that becomes the whole sort of nurture bit, doesn't it, about how you deal with that and how you and so on. So the whole nature nurture argument is actually, for a number of different reasons and a number of different topics, is fascinating. And how much does society influence you, or how much do you influence society? And it's all of that sort of stuff. So, and that's fascinating. And I take your point to an extent about the withdrawing from society, but Harold Shipman as a working GP.
Yes.
How much can he withdraw from society? And I take your point in terms of, okay, you might not go out to dinner parties of an evening or whatever, but he would have to continue with a daily persona of being a working GP. So I take your point. Yes, you do get those, I suppose, this is a horrible phrase, the deviant minds that withdraw and then plot and plan and all of that. But to be a working GP within a community and still do the things that he did, like, fascinating. Like
Shipman obviously had a situation there where he was in a position of authority.
Yeah.
He already had a position of power and started so young that by the time it mattered, he'd already perfected that element of his daily routine. And it is routine. That people are expected to see him. People would want to go and see him. So he had new victims appearing every day. Yeah. And all he had to do was just pick the right ones.
Just
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's I firmly believe with regards to the psychological side of it, everybody has it in them to kill.
Yeah.
It's just where your trigger point is.
Yeah.
So it would, but to sit there time after time after time after time and see the lights go out in someone, I can't.
No.
And I'm glad I can't. I can't
Yeah.
fathom that sort of frenzy or that sort of predisposed planning.
Yeah.
For that sort of thing. No, I can't put myself in that situation and think, do you know what? I can understand that, because I can't.
No.
And I think with Shipman, with that sort of, I say authority and the time he had, like that he had, well, what would work out? 29 years. 29 years, slowly, methodically, routinely, just picking one off, one at a time.
Yeah.
And it's just that in itself is planning.
Yeah.
Because you're not just randomly going round to Sandra's house and saying, you know what, today's the day. Oh, I'm not feeling very well. I've got a bit of pain. Oh, do you know what? I'll give you this. It'll make you feel. And then they just pass out. And then they have nothing about it. And they'll say that goes back to the capture phase. At that point, they've got no. Their captor can't. Their victim cannot escape.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I believe it's a situation with him where he had a persona that he had to keep up, but they all had personas they had to keep up.
Yeah.
But it's just about the planning and how good you are at doing that.
Who wants to chuck a different case study out there then that we can then compare to that? Who wants to go next with theirs that they've researched?
I might as well go with mine then, because mine's a different take on it. Mine is this idea: serial killers, as a general rule, there's just continually just one after the other until they're caught, and ultimately most serial killers want to get caught. I mean, you look at it's a Zodiac killer. Years later, still, apparently recently haven't they recently just cracked the Zodiac code?
Right.
I think I've read that somewhere that they've recently cracked it, and it's far too late now to do anything about that. You've got the Black Dahlia case as well, which is an interesting one back in LA, which is a very interesting one about a Z-list actress, and all of a sudden it's gone from the East Asias to LA and then the guy just, whoever they believe it. There's a book about his son wrote about it, and his son is an ex-detective. He sat there, broke it down bit by bit, and literally at the end of the book, it's just like, and he was pretty sure it's his dad who did it.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting scenario to be in with that. But with serial killers, I find that sometimes there's a little bit like Adam said at the very beginning. It's just like that whole stabbing, that whole frenzy thing. My take on it is just like, what about hitmen, mafia hitmen? Mafia hitmen are serial killers.
100%.
They just do it by contract. They just do it. They get paid. One of my favorites. One of the most disturbing cases because I've read the book. I've seen enough documentaries about the guy. Is a guy called Richard Kuklinski, known as the Iceman. The only reason he was caught was because one of his victims had frozen. So they found the body, and that was that. He has anywhere between 100 and 200 men. All under contract, on the mafia contract. He worked for mob bosses like Paul Castellano, Carmine Galante, Roy DeMeo, and Jimmy Hoffa. So these are guys that he was involved with. If anybody knew where Jimmy Hoffa was, Kuklinski would know where Jimmy Hoffa was.
Well, I was going to go on my question. You know, if he worked with him, is there a possibility there that Mr. Hoffa that might be the cause of his disappearance? Because that's pretty much what's assumed has happened to him, isn't it?
Absolutely, disappeared. Isn't he under Jet Stadium or something? Or,
Giants as well.
Giant Stadium, yeah. Yeah.
He was a hitman who could never be made. He was never an Italian American, so he could never be made. But he was very good at what he did. One of the most disturbing stories I ever heard about him was that he was paid to kidnap a guy who I think had been messing around with some guy's daughter or his wife, and basically he took him to a forest where he'd actually, again, pre-planning, found a cave where at night the rats would come out. And the guy said he'd pay him extra money if he'd tape it. So he kidnapped this guy, chucked him in the back of his car, in the boot of his car, took him there, broke pretty much every bone in the guy's body, sat him on a chair, stuck a videotape in a recorder, and then just let it, and then left, knowing the guy could never escape, knowing he was going to get eaten to death by the rats, which is exactly what happened. And the guy was absolutely delighted with the video and paid him extra money for doing it.
So, okay, so I'm going to throw it out there then.
Terrifying man, because his family life was. He tried to keep the separate between his family life and work, because he started off as doing videotapes. Started off by literally working in a film lab, and then doing all sorts of distributing Disney films and pornographic materials, which is very lucrative, and then ended up getting involved in a group which specialized in burglaries and stuff like that, and then ended up, because he was so useful, he could never be made, but he was a useful asset.
So go on then, Ad. So what Ken's just said there, and you, Andy, serial killer or not serial killer?
Yeah, undoubtedly a serial killer in terms of he's murdered multiple people. Yes, he was paid to do it, and it's a hired hitman. But ultimately, whether he did it just for the money or for the pleasure or what his motives were, he's certainly a serial killer, and he killed, a large number of people.
Always say to the very last days, it was just business.
Yeah, that's psychosis, isn't it? To be able to write it off as something as irrelevant as a business transaction.
There's videos of interviews of him on YouTube which I've watched, and the guy is, his Iceman moniker is exactly what it is. He's ice cold, matter of fact, to the point. Does not beat around the bush. It was business, straight business. He was paid very handsomely to do a job for someone, and that's what he did. I mean, when George Malaband, he was meant to be meeting Kuklinski to sell him some tapes. He was carrying $27,000 at the time. His body was found shot multiple times and found in a 55-gallon drum. Kuklinski took a plea deal on it, but admitted to shooting him 5 times and explained it was due to business. His way to separate his family life, which wasn't great, because he grew up in a very, very rough part of Jersey. So his childhood was very, very hard, hard. But his home life was affluent. They had his wife always said that we had a lot of Italian American friends, a lot of Italian friends. But the food was good and life was good. Richard had these moments where he was violent. We had a temper and stuff like that. But this was a completely different period of time that we're living now.
Question for you then. If he was classed as a serial killer, Chris Kyle, who was the American sniper made famous in the film American Sniper, is he a serial killer?
That's a war, though, isn't it? War.
But he's killed multiple people, though. Is it different?
By definition, yeah. But
that's,
told it's okay because he's
exactly. I'm playing devil's advocate here, because if Kenny's saying it was okay, Kuklinski was he was hired to do that job and he was paid to do that job and he's classed as a serial killer. That's exactly, and I'm not saying for 1 minute that I do think Chris Kyle's a serial killer, by the way.
War is legal, though, isn't it? By definition of some form, if you like to. Don't take me up on that. Please, nobody at me on that one. I'm not pro-war. I'm the least pro-war person you're going to meet. But
war is business.
It is. What this guy did was killing people for for the mafia. That's
for illegal reasons, I suppose.
I would say it's a very, and this is why it's a grey area. When Ken said that's who he was thinking he's doing, same as you guys, I wouldn't have even entertained that thought of somebody like that being a serial killer. But when you break it down, I
suppose that. I mean, I don't know what the definition is, and I could Google it or stuff. But what is the definition of serial killer? Not somebody who has killed lots of people, but serial killer.
Yeah, go on, Andy. What's your take on it then, dude? While Ken's googling.
Oh, I guess serial killer is just someone who's killed more than once.
No, I mean this guy would. Yeah, well,
this guy. Well, I was thinking before, like with Harold Shipman, for example, it might not be about the kill. It might be a way of him pretending he's more cleverer than the police, or you know what I mean? Like he's
like
getting away with it
and stuff like that. And,
exactly.
And he killed Jack the Ripper.
I'm going to do it and get away with it.
Yeah, so it could be down to that. I think with the Hitman guy, it's like, well, I don't know. I think he's very. He must I can't think of the word now. Compartmentalize a lot of his feelings and stuff.
Got to put your thumb up.
Yeah, to separate your family life to business. It's a very interesting view, and I think a lot of like murders, for example, are down to like they're not planned. They're just like little emotional things. But this guy's like the Iceman, and he's done it multiple times, and it's interesting.
The dictionary definition, by the way, of serial killer is a person who carries out a series of murders.
Yeah.
Series of murders.
I suppose you then need a definition of murder, don't you? So what is the definition of murder? And and I don't know why I'm mentioning Chris Kyle because he's an American hero sort of thing, but
Let's just make that clear now. Tall Boy Radio is not besmirching the character or
not
the
at
name.
all. Not at all. I'm just trying to, I suppose, investigate the psyche of it, I suppose, the different views of it. Yeah. So if we're going to go down the route of he has killed more than one person, well, actually, lots of people, and you go down in employment, whether it's for the British government, the American government, the army, the navy, lots of people will have killed lots of people. So therefore,
the dictionary definition of murder for Gaz is murder is the deliberate and illegal killing of a person, or to murder someone means to commit the crime of killing them deliberately.
So I suppose the illegal bit. So he has killed them. He has killed them. Into Chris Kyle. Now he has killed them, but it's not illegal.
No, it's not unlawful. And
So
that's
I suppose that yeah. Okay.
We've cleared his name. We've cleared his name. That's the good news.
Success
in the twisted court of Judge Lionel. Not.
We've done well there. Well done, guys. Good job. Oh my God, we'll sleep easy tonight.
Go on, Andy. See if you can take us into a grayer area. I dare you.
Challenge accepted. I want to talk about a serial killer, Tony the Tiger. The best Frosties in the world. No.
They're great.
Well, I suppose we're going to change the serial killer, and Jack the Ripper is the one I wanted to do on.
I like your first one. Go on with him. What about
Jack the Rapper? Yeah.
He sounds interesting.
This guy's like, every time I go to London, you got to nip to London dungeons.
Yeah, Jack the Ripper. He's the most famous one, isn't he? Surely.
Yeah.
In terms of the UK.
And when you break it down, he's killed 5 people in like 3 months, which ain't a great number compared to Shipman and all that. But I was like, when I was doing the research stuff, there's different aspects, and that is, it was like people think it's the reporters picking up the deaths more than what it was. So it might have been like 5 separate. There's 5 murders, but it might have been like different people doing it. But because they're quite gruesome, the paper's there like, oh, look at this. This is dead bad, and there's a serial killer and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, each death was different. Like the last one was in her own house in her bed, all the guts taken out, and it's quite a gruesome thing.
Yeah,
and then,
the photos are not pleasant.
No.
Yeah. And didn't he carve? Did he carve some initials onto some people, or was it on the cheek or something? There was something to do with carve.
There was no message left on the wall or something. The Jews are the ones who will not be blamed for nothing or something like that.
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
and the police rubbed it out because they didn't want a race war and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was at the time when like DNA evidence was only just starting out. So how they'd catch a killer in that sort of time, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, unless someone's visibly seen it and gone, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think with Jack the Ripper, that's part of the intrigue, is that he was never caught. He was never put to pay for his crimes. The other guys that we've talked about, have been been punished for what they've done, and been caught and been blamed. This guy is somebody who, to this day, was it 1880s when he was committing his crimes?
1890s, was it? Yeah.
Yeah. He was. He was. he's never been put to bay. There was a great program actually on Sky a couple of years ago where they put forward a very unusual case as to who it might be. That it was an American chap by the name of H.H. Holmes. Yeah, and now this is
the murder house in Chicago.
The murder house, the murder castle in Chicago. Now, basically, he had a hotel and he designed it so that there was various different dungeons and places where you could take guests away and murder them. Now, he was convicted of killing. I've got to note it down. He was convicted of killing 27, but may have committed very many more crimes. And there are rumors. Yeah, over 200, And there are rumours, because he was not in the country at the time that Jack the Ripper was committing crime. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of conjecture to say he was in England, and the knife that was used, he commonly used in Chicago, was also used in the Jack the Ripper crimes as well. So there's a lot of conjecture. Certainly, I think his grandson who has his diaries and is rather convinced that it was him who committed these crimes that Jack the Ripper's got blamed for. But there's there was I can remember maybe about 10, 15 years ago, there was diaries that had surfaced from a chap by the name of James Maybrick.
James Maybrick is the one that I associate with Jack the Ripper, but I'm sure there's something to there was some sort of carving or something, JM or J something, and they attributed that to effectively him.
Well, James if you think about James Maybrick, the first two and last two letters of his name, JA and CK, is Jack, James Maybrick, and that that was part of the things they were thinking with that. And then obviously there was rumors that it was a member of the royal family. And then let's just say it wasn't him. Then why did this guy stop? Why did he just commit the 5 murders? Because they escalated quickly, like Andy said.
Obviously, you try and Google like suspects, and there's just like they just thrown out loads of names, and like the H.H. Holmes he had like a period in his life, 88 and 89, where he didn't have any like travel documents like stored or anything. So the years before that and afterwards, he'd go somewhere and he'll leave business cards around, or he'll claim on business or something like that. So his grandson went through his diaries and said, "Yeah, look, there's this period missing, so he might have been in London, blah 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 blah." But then there's like one of the other.
Wikipedia has 18 names, by the way. 18, including Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, which goes back to what Adam said about the royal family. James Maybrick, Michael Maybrick, these are all. I mean, as I say, 18 names, and there's further theories. But remember that the whole thing came down as well to a paranormal thing, like Spring-Heeled Jack. Where he was literally able to escape literally seconds after the crime had appeared and literally just bounce over walls and stuff. So there's a paranormal element to it because, as you rightfully pointed out, Adam, it's never been solved. And these are just names. If H.H. Holmes did it, that'd be amazing.
I mean, it sort of makes you wonder, obviously, with the advancement of DNA testing and this, that, and the other, obviously, nowadays there will be lots of ways that he could be caught, whoever it may be. But, back in the day, as you say, to actually catch somebody, you would physically have to have somebody standing at the end of the alley watching it happen, then going to report it to the police, and effectively the police there, and I suppose, if you excuse the pun, catching red-handed, because literally, and again, there were stories of, was one of the murders, and I can't remember who, was it Mary, somebody who there was a policeman, I'm sure it was like at the end of the alley or was only a few yards away or something, and it happened, and then the police were literally on site within, and I don't know the facts, I haven't got the stats, like literally within like a minute or whatever it was of it happening, and he's gone, literally he's gone, and you're just like, but when you think of serial killers and everything that we've said so far in this episode, why did he stop? Because if what we're saying is you need that gratification, you need that high, you need that kick of the act that you're committing, why did he stop? Was it that he felt as though the police were getting too close to him and therefore he had to stop, otherwise he would get... But then, did we not say earlier that most serial killers, in a way, they want to get caught and they want to... I don't know. Why did he stop?
I didn't go through all 18 suspects, but 2 of them was the H.H. Holmes guy. It could have been that he was building up, because each murder was slightly different. He was building up to the hotel Well,
Did the hotel
Murder
come
Castle.
after the murders then?
Yeah. I think
the hotel thing's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. The fact
was it like a hotel, the first floor, and then the second and third are all like
false
traps
floors, false walls, just
incredible.
Where no sound, rooms where no sound escaped, walls with holes in them, so they could be murdered by any means. And then he used to just because he had like an industrial oven down in the basement.
Yeah.
And then used to just cremate them,
Incinerated them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's
was he caught because his assistant basically ratted him out and said, "I can't do this anymore."
I think so.
And then ratted him out. So. Yeah.
But that's interesting answer though. Potentially that Gaz is asking. Well, why did he stop? Maybe he didn't. He just moved on to do it elsewhere. And in the case of, I think James Maybrick was poisoned by his wife, which would explain as to why he stopped. Is that arsenic poisoning.
Disease as well would have been rife as well, so that would have been
very true. Very true.
I can't think. Was it the? I want to say, was it Ted Bundy? Maybe. Who did he commit lots of different murders in lots of different states? And at that point, the police forces didn't really talk to each other, and that's how he could sort of get away. They didn't effectively share information about crimes that had gone on across borders and stuff. So
he escaped and fled to Florida and got picked up there, I think.
He effectively was able to sort of kill in a number of different states, and actually the police departments of those individual states didn't really talk. So therefore, that's how he would. So maybe you're right that the Jack the Ripper bit maybe went to a different part of the country and committed some crimes, but it wasn't as well publicised or heard of. Or did he go to another country? Or I suppose there's all those there's all those sort of the theories about why he stopped.
Looking at some of the suspects, like one guy was found dead on the day of the last murder, like found in the river. Another guy was a German merchant sailor, so he could have gone away. There's the guy who was a painter who painted all the scenes, and you suspect he like put all clues in the paintings and stuff like that. How
long? Sort of what was a span of murders? Was it months or
3
years?
months. So it was
3 months. So
So
theoretically, it could have been a sailor, a seaman that arrived in London and then stayed for 3 or 4 months and then jumped on a ship and went elsewhere. I don't know.
2 were on one night as well, weren't they? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. Second and third, third and fourth. Sorry.
Yeah.
The one that
is it interesting?
Is the fourth one.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry. The fourth one was the one where she was seen with a guy who was in his 30s and walked down like an alleyway or whatever.
Definitely.
And all of a sudden he's gone. But what I was going to say then, there was one guy called Francis Craig who was a reporter, and he married the last murder victim. And it's theorized that he was the one who sent all the letters to, the press and stuff like that. But also because he found out his wife was a prostitute, so he murdered the other ones to make it look like it was someone else. And she was the last one, so that was why it was like he was blamed for it. Well, suspected, should we say?
It's absolutely true. Yeah, the whole thing's really, really interesting. I think it's just it's never going to be solved. It's never going to be. There's never going to be a situation where it's just going to go. You know what? That's the guy. We're never, because that would ruin. That would just ruin the whole thing. It's just a situation where it would just ruin the story. And in fairness, now do we really want it to be solved? And even if we do solve it now, people are going to be like, no, we like it the way it was. Nah, it doesn't. The TV series, by the way, Adam, is called American Ripper.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was on History Channel, and I have also watched it. I mean, I haven't seen it in ages, but Andy brought up some really good ones there, and I was just nodding along. I was like, about there was a cotton merchant, and said there was he married a prostitute, and then obviously I went around killing the other ones, and it was just it's the whole thing's really, really interesting. However, it depends on which side of the fence you fall. Are the Maybrick ones correct? Are the H.H. Holmes ones correct? Does anybody right now care? Do we really want this solved now?
I think it has gone into the sort of psyche of the unsolvable. Do we as this is not everybody's bothered about it, obviously, but do we actually want it solved. You know, is there that aura, that mystique about it, sort of thing. Go on then. So who was yours then? Who was your guy?
The one that I picked was a chap by the name of Rodley Alcala or Alcala. I don't know how his name's properly pronounced, but this is a guy. In terms of serial killers, we could have picked the likes of Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, Richard Ramirez, very very famous people. This is a guy I'd never heard of until I watched a documentary on him. And he killed 7. He killed 5 in California between 77 and 79, and 2 between 71 and 77 in New York. Now, he started off his crime career in child molestation. He was prosecuted, served parole, served very short sentences for what seems to me like very, very heinous crimes. Now, this guy, his modus operandi was to strangle victims until they were unconscious, wait until they were revived, then do it again and again and again before killing them. So certainly a sadist. And he was most commonly referred to as the dating game killer because mid-spree, he appeared on the American equivalent of Blind Date. And he was one of the 3 guys and was actually picked by the woman to go on a date with him, but having spoken to him backstage, refused because she found him far too creepy. And the other 2 contestants also referred to him as being very creepy and a very strange individual. And the thing about him was the way he picked and got his victims was he posed as a photographer. He had some ability in terms of photography. He would take pictures of his victim, and he had a storage lockup with over 1,200 pictures of that. Now, all not of 1,200 people, but there was about 200-300 people in there. And one of those was later. He was prosecuted and he's sentenced. I think he's still alive to this day. Actually, I think he's 77 years old now, but after admitting to the 7 murders that he'd committed and the number of rapes that he'd committed as well, he then they released a series of 120 photographs, and one of which led to the identification of a missing person, and he later confessed to killing them as well. And that's the thing that sort of probably stuck with me most. That this guy, obviously, there are hundreds of people photographed in there that aren't identified. There are a number of families of missing people who think that it could be them, but it's never been proved. So this guy, again, could be guilty of far more murders than he is currently serving a sentence for. And that in itself is quite upsetting to think about in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, going back in the day, the people who have potentially killed a lot more people than they've been sort of convicted of is actually quite frightening. And I suppose you look at, in America or Australia or Canada or these huge countries, Russia, obviously, was it Andrei Chikatilo is a famous serial killer and stuff. And I remember sort of reading about him sort of growing up. But these big countries where you would get effective drifters, or you get the outback in Australia and people go missing, and all of a sudden it's like they're missing people never really to be seen again, and it makes you wonder, like, actually, okay, are they just missing, and have they had a terrible accident, or actually is there somebody out there that's not hunting them down as such, but effectively killing them? Predator, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And they just travel the highways and they see a victim, and effectively it's right, okay, you're on your own, you're a backpacker, you're a traveller, you're a this, you're a that, and effectively, you if you're a predator, you're my prey now, and that's that. It's look, this episode, we could do an episode 2, an episode 3, an episode 4 of serial killers. I haven't mentioned my other 2, and there's so many that you could talk about, but it is that, going back to what you said right at the start, Ad, the fascination with serial killers. And I suppose for me, it's the fascination with them is I'm trying to understand how that person could do those things to other human beings. That for me is the crux of the question. Is I say the motive, but what fundamentally and mentally, physiologically, whatever it may be, emotionally, what drives them to be able to do the things that they are convicted of, and to kill and to mutilate and to do all these horrendous things to other human beings, and that's something that I don't think I will ever, and in a way I'm glad I will never fully understand. But just to be able to try to rationalize how they do these things, and I can't, I can't rationalize it in any way. If you said to me, and going back to what Ken said a minute ago, a few minutes ago, I do think that everybody's capable of murder. I do think everybody's capable of, not murder, but maybe killing another human being to some extent. If a situation came where my wife or my daughters or whatever were threatened to the point that they potentially would lose their life, I suspect I could act in a way that would mean me taking the life of another human being. Could I do that to innocent people time after time after time after time? Absolutely. I just cannot comprehend how an individual could do that.
The interesting side to that, Gary, as well, is obviously, as you said, with regards to if your wife and daughters were in that situation, you could probably do it. That would be an.
I don't know whether I could, because
no, but it's an interesting psychological. It's an interesting psychological standpoint as well. That if you turn around and say you couldn't, that you would actually you couldn't put yourself in that situation or do it. I mean, I digress slightly, but I found a small list of motives for serial killers. So I'll just go through those very quickly. Like visionary, where they're having a suffering from a psychotic break from reality. Mission orientated, or ridding the world of certain types of people that should be vagrants or hookers or whatever it is. The hedonistic types are the ones who seek thrills and derives pleasure from killing. You've got the lust type, which is where sex is the primary, where they rape the body afterwards, or there's a whole sort of thing. The thrill kill is where they induce pain and terror. Richard Ramirez was one of those, as he wanted to see the light. He wanted to see the terror in their eyes before he killed them. You've got the comfort ones who gain materially from it, or a comfortable lifestyle from the murder, from the serial killing. H.H. Holmes, as an example of that, killed for insurance. Power and control, which ultimately they have the power of life and death over someone. That ultimately has to be part of it as a staple. And then obviously media influence is obviously Ted Bundy said that hardcore pornography was one of the reasons why he did it. And obviously it's a situation where how much does it, I don't know why does it excuse it, but how much does society and the media now have a factor in these sort of developments in people, especially as we spoke about early on, where people now have been forced to stay in either at work or at home for 11 months now here in the UK.
Ad, what you're going to raise a point now, weren't you? What?
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question then. Is that where the fascination comes from then? In that you're talking about an act that you physically can't put yourself in the shoes of someone who perpetrates it. Is that the fascination? Is that spark that intrigues people? They do something that you do not feel you are physically capable of doing.
Question. Same as paranormal then. Same sort of thing. It's same sort of with something we don't understand that we try to understand, but we can't do it. But as we said many podcasts ago now, the quest for knowledge, the intrigue of trying to learn about it. Again, as you guys point out, if we're every time there's a serial killer on TV, is it not just voyeurism? We sit there and just soak it up.
Yeah, and I suppose you go down the route of, and what you just said there, Ken, in terms of are there different types of serial killers that have different motives and different reasons, and therefore is that what we're fascinated with? Is did they do it for monetary gain, or did they do it for fame, or did they do it for? I mean, you look at. I mean, one of the guys that I was going to mention, Sir Peter Sutcliffe, said that he denied murder but admitted to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, claiming that he was the voice of God and that he effectively God was telling him to go and kill the prostitutes and the hookers and stuff. So, you know,
but it was a very lonely life for him, wasn't it? He was in a truck all day, and so again, this removed from society per se.
Interesting.
Absolutely, and
just his cab all day. I mean,
that's the, you know, that's the actually, you know what, I'm doing it for otherworldly reasons, or I'm doing it for, you know, because God's spoken to me or whatever, you know, and that's what he,
the visionary,
you know,
or the mission
he's, you know, I think there were 13 people he killed and stuff, although there were 13 murders, but I think 22 people potentially were his victims, although some didn't die. But he effectively said, you know, it was God's will. You know, I was acting on the voice of God. God told me to do it, and I think he was tried for murder in the end, but he pleaded not guilty, but did plead guilty to manslaughter. So, and as I say, the defence counsel sort of said diminished responsibility, and whether or not the prosecution sort of said yeah, whatever, and sort of, you know, sort of convicted him anyway, sort of thing. But we'll never get to the bottom of why they do things, because I think there are so many different reasons why people do things. So, and that's the crux. We just try to understand a little bit as to what might be the reasons or the motives behind it. And whilst we can't understand that, are we enlightened enough to understand that there might be other people who understand that, if that makes sort of any sense? I don't understand why anybody or how anybody could kill lots of people. But I'm sure
there's a statistic where you walk past one potential serial killer, like, is it every 10 people?
I don't know.
I think there's some random stats out there. But yeah, sorry guys, I just popped into
I understand how. I personally don't understand, because I can't comprehend how somebody could do these things to other human beings. But I think I can understand enough that other people might understand why they do it. I don't, and I can't, and this is not me saying for 1 minute that I sort of, I forgive them for all of that. I don't. I'm not. But I think I can understand why some people might feel as though they're justified in doing it. In a way, I don't believe that, but
I think this is one of those episodes where we definitely do a second episode on it, just purely and simply because I feel like we're probably at a halfway point here, and we're over the hour mark, and I'm just sort of conscious that after that people stop listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might be doing the people a disservice there, but. Maybe. Yeah, I think it's something that we follow up at another time, pick some other case studies, just carry on that debate, because certainly, you never even got on to talking about people locally around here that
absolutely.
Donald Nielsen, who was based very near us.
Very near us, yeah.
Very near us, and sightings in Osage allegedly. So... Yeah. Do we want to sum it up? Do we want to wrap it up and say our goodbyes? Who wants to go first doing that one? Because it's certainly been a very interesting episode, this one.
It's been a great episode. I think from a perspective of serial killers, the reason why people are so interested in them is because it's out of the norm. It's thrilling. It's exciting. It's I could never do that. Oh, really? Did that happen? It's something very different to the routine and the norm. And I think it's been an incredibly enlightening episode, because it shows that what we've spoken about today is not something that's just like we've looked at lightly. We've looked at it from a perspective of a whole different. We've done it from a power authority, as that's like with Shipman. We've done it from a contract standpoint, with Richard Kuklinski. You got to say with Andy's, where it's mythical, or almost. To the point of we genuinely don't want it solving, and yours, which was a very random, the guy was on TV and still did it. All walks of life, no specific set pattern. Nobody had said this is the pigeonhole they're in. It was all very different. I'm sure you could go down the Bundy route. You could do 7 podcasts on Bundy.
Yeah, easily.
I mean,
very
absolutely,
interesting character.
just very, very interesting. That guy knew exactly what he was doing at all times. Very smart. Should have been a politician.
Very charismatic as well, wasn't he? And this is an interesting
Hugely
thing about him.
Hugely so. But I think that's why people are so interested in it, because it's out of the norm. It's something different from their daily routines. It's like if somebody puts a serial killer. Do you remember the sniper killings in Washington?
Yes.
That got massive media presence because it was out of the norm. It was weird, random. Why are they getting shot at gas stations? Why are these people? What is it? It was just random people. But it excited America and excited the world because it was something different. And that's what people crave, something different. And that's why this has been a really, really good episode, because again, I know that the podcast doesn't have set niches or set pigeonholes where it wants to put itself. But again, something different. It's very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting.
Cheers, dude. Andy?
It's quite an interesting one. Hopefully we've picked up enough interest for people to enjoy the episode and want more. Stay tuned.
But just to say, I know I've already said, but thank you for having me on for this one. This has been a really, really interesting one. I know I'm going to be convalescing for 2 or 3 weeks in the next month or so. So I'm looking forward to catching up with all the ones I've missed, and hoping to over to you guys real soon.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have you back on while you're convalescing.
Thank you very much indeed. Fancy word.
Well, no worries.
Absolutely.
Kazza?
Really. Interesting episode. We could easily do a serial killer episode 2, 3, 4. There's lots of characters who historically have been serial killers that I would love to sort of investigate and talk about. The Fred West, the Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, the Eileen Vaughan, the Australian woman, the serial killer. Not many women are serial killers and stuff. So there's lots of people, and then you go down the Bundy, Charles Manson. We haven't even looked at the Charles Manson, which is really famous. If you go down the Charles Manson route, you then have to go down the Waco route in terms of the cult aspect of it.
I watched that live on TV, and
there's all sorts of. There's lots and lots and lots of very, very famous. I mean, I mentioned him earlier, the Chikatilo sort of serial killer. There's loads and loads of people you could talk about. And I am, in a way, very curiously fascinated by the psyche of the serial killer and what goes on. So, yeah, really looking forward to the next one. We absolutely have to do a follow-up to this episode. And as always, guys, if you have enjoyed listening to us, and this is going to sound the wrong phrase, but, if there's a serial killer that you have a particular interest in that we haven't mentioned, get in touch with us. More than happy for you to come on, drop us a soundbite, give us a name, let us investigate it, talk about it, and let's look where this can go. So enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
I have to say, guys, when you sent through the list of ones that you were going to be talking about, I thought you'd been watching Gavin and Stacey, because it was all the surnames from there. You go back and check it. They use surnames of serial killers, and that it was
Shipman, Sutcliffe, and West, or whatever. They were the three. They were the three that I was going to look at.
The 3 big surnames from Gavin and Stacey. For me, the most interesting thing about this is, like I say, I don't think we've definitively answered it, but we've shared a few opinions on it. Certainly, for me, whenever I watch any program about somebody murdering somebody, it's motive that fascinates me most, because this is going to sound incredibly selfish. I hate the ones where it is purely random. I like it to be a reason why somebody's done it, because in that way, if they perpetrate something and it's done for a specific reason, it can't happen to me. When it's random, it could. And those are the bits that I really, really don't like. So no doubt we will be covering off another episode at this at some point, probably 2021, because I really enjoyed this one. But until next time, when no doubt we'll have plenty more stuff to talk about. Take care and don't have nightmares.